Good afternoon, folks. How are things going today? Um, yeah, back after the long holiday weekend. Just want to today. Did want to address this question right away, Michael. Will I actually did not get a chance to do that this morning. I did have one business thing to do this morning and a bunch of things my wife wanted me to do. So I am a little bit behind today. I want to talk about things going on in the world right now. And I want us to start reconsidering the idea of China and reconsidering the narrative about China's economic rise that has been promulgated over the last couple of decades, really over the last in the light of the challenges that China has going forward, and the way it has to do with their demographics, how that affects their economy, what that is going to do to consumerism, and how debt is going to play into this. Now, there's been kind of two opposing factions when it comes to looking at the future of China. The one that gets the most noise, and even the view that I've supported at times, when you go back and look at my videos, is that China is this unstoppable behemoth. They're going to overtake the United States in terms of economic size. And they are basically going to be the center of civilization going forward, like they've been for many thousands of years, in the past. If you really look at the last 150 to 200 years since the Taiping Rebellion or so, I think that began in the 1830s. That's when China sort of lost its place as one of the most technologically and economically advanced societies on the planet. And there has been this narrative, and I hate using the word narrative because it's overused today, especially by conspiracy theorists, that China is going to sort of overtake the United States in terms of its economic productivity. So I've been thinking about this question a lot, especially over the last 2 years or 3 years, where we keep seeing lockdown after lockdown after lockdown in China. We see something we haven't seen in China for a long time, really since Mao Zedong, where we now see a cult of personality really solidly developing around Xi Jinping. Now, I'm not saying it's on the same level of Mao and degree politics and China. We don't really know that much about what goes on in the CCP, but we know that town and village, township and village enterprises that really took off in the 1990s and early 2000s, that has kind of been pushed back a little bit now, and now there's more of a wave of centralization with the government taking a more active role in commerce. There are many people in the United States, I'm not one of them, that thinks that this is a very positive development in the economy and that China has control over their economy. I'm not one of those. You're looking at people in the Ray Dalio camp who look at China being this inevitability, that we're looking at the next Chinese century. Then you have a smaller cadre of people, of intellectuals, that are really starting to change the view on China's future. And a lot of that has to do with the concept of demographics being destiny. And that is something that I can certainly agree with. And China and Japan are both going through something that we've never really seen happen before, which is an industrialized society have a declining population. So this presents a number of different problems that we need to take a look at when it comes to China. So, first of all, I wanted to cover a little bit about what's going on with the China's COVID lockdown protests. I don't know how significant these are. Because there's not a lot of good widespread reporting on that, and Twitter is battling an army of bots right now that are basically doing junk posts to obscure all of the news coming out of China in their interests of control. So against China's strict zero COVID policy and restrictions on freedom took place around like in a wave of disobedience not seen before under President Xi Jinping. And of course, these are all the cities that it went under. There's this handy graphic here that I don't know what it's based on, so I'm not sure how seriously I want to take it, even though it does come from Oxford, which ranks government stringency on an index based on 9 indicators that include school and workplace closures and travel bans. So China has been far and above over the US and UK in terms of travel restrictions. And we look at the COVID cases and deaths since 2020. There's definitely been a huge spike as the economy reopened. So there are a number of videos on here that show people in the streets, but relative to what's actually going on in the country of a country of 1.45 billion people, these pictures don't really tell us very much other than there are people standing protesting what the scale of these protests are. So that's what I find very, very interesting in Western media is that we may be making a much bigger. Okay, so I didn't realize there were quite so many videos on here. It's not coming through on my yeah. So tons of protests going on right now, according to these videos. But like I said, in terms of determining what the scale of those protests are, I think that's actually kind of impossible right now. But let's put this in perspective here. They've been under one lockdown in one form or another for almost 3 years now, really since December of 2019. There have been lockdowns. We're now in December of 2022. And it's really affecting global supply chains. And the fear of further disruption in global supply chains is one of the things that upset the market today. So this being really important here, Guangzhou is a huge export hub in China. It's almost as big as Shanghai. I think that, or maybe bigger than Shanghai, actually. The Pearl River Valley, that area, has about 57 million people that live in that area. And we are looking at protests going on in that export hub, which if that's shut down, that's kind of a big deal. So let's take a look at some of the alternative narrative that we're starting to hear now. Whoops. Jason says a lot of audio is dropping out. Reboot in order. I tell you what, I am going to get rid of this page that is taking up a lot of resources, and I apologize for that. But my connection here is where I live is kind of really close to the border, so it's pretty spotty sometimes. So I hope you guys are able to hear me now. But yeah, so let's talk about what we're talking about here when it says revising down the rise of China. There have been a number of different research reports that have come out recently where it is now believed that China probably overestimated its population. There are some indications that the population actually probably peaked between 2008 and 2011 and has been declining since, even though this is the first year in 2022 that there is a projected decline in Chinese population. It may have started declining sometime between 2008 and 2011. And there's also the possibility that China's the size of their economy has been vastly overestimated over time as the numbers have been manipulated. So this is kind of the basal findings of a lot of this new group of intellectuals that are looking at China. China will likely experience a substantial long-term growth slowdown owing to demographic decline, the limits of capital-intensive growth, and gradual deceleration in productivity growth. And part of that gradual deceleration of productivity growth come from them switching to a service-based economy as well, trying to move away from all manufacturing and to kick up their services economy as well. Sometimes you're looking at a declining productivity growth. So productivity is actually a key thing to understand when it comes to okay. Productivity. I'm going to get to some of these comments here in a minute. Productivity is actually a key thing to understanding China. China's productivity level is on the same level as the United States in the 1950s. They are far less productive per hour worked in terms of the GDP than any of the top 20 economies on the entire planet. And I think I have some graphics on that. So right now, they're trying to run a race between the decline of population and a rise in productivity to maintain the living standards that they have. So as their population declines and as their population ages, then productivity has to rise faster than that decline in order for them to maintain their living standards. So this is one of the things that I think is worrying about China. Now, I've been on the bandwagon of China needing to turn into a consumer-based economy at some point, not just an export economy, in order to support internal growth. My faith in that occurring is diminishing day by day when I start looking at the numbers here. So, yeah, the executive summary here is that China's future of their ongoing global rise is of great importance to both China and the rest of the world. Predicting long-term economic performance is inherently difficult and open to debate, of course. Nonetheless, we show that substantial long-term growth deceleration is the likely future for China, given the legacy effects of its uniquely draconian past population policies, reliance on investment-driven growth, and slowing productivity growth. Even assuming continued broad policy success, our projections suggest that growth will slow sharply to roughly 3% a year by 2030 and 2 to 3% a year on average over the 3 decades to 2050. Growing faster, up to say 5% a year to 2050, is notionally possible, given that China remains below the national productivity frontier. Basically, for the OECD countries, they are well below average in terms of productivity, and that's where they're saying there's a bunch of room for growth in that. So, however, they also show that the prospect of doing so is well beyond China's track record in delivering productivity enhancing reform, and therefore well beyond its likely trajectory. And there's an entire range of research. There's an entire range of research that goes into this, and we need to start paying attention to that. And this article was written, at least the first article in this was written not just in June 15th of 2022, but a while ago, noting that China, while it's going up the ranks of a superpower, it is a low productivity superpower. The shift from agricultural to industrial work has masked some of the growth challenges, especially in the service sector, like I talked about earlier, but also their increases in productivity. In the space of just a few decades, China has risen the rank of a world power, and certainly as an Asian regional power. And now China and the U.S. have locked arms in a great power struggle over trade, foreign investment, intellectual property, and technology transfer policies. So I think that this is being overblown to a degree. Like I said, the public perception of this adversarial relationship between the United States and China it's far less adversarial behind the scenes. It's mostly very professional. They are rivals, not necessarily enemies. And we are propagandized into believing that our populations should be rivals, but the people behind the scenes, it's just we're not enemies. We're just rivals. But behind the scenes here, China is very worried about their demographic collapse, and this is really the graphic that you want to take a look at. This is the population in 2020. And you're looking at the people that are most productive in a society between age 20 and age 45. As of 2020, you have this like bump here around 50 years old, where these people are a good 10 years away from retirement. And you see this generation declining here. You got another little bump at around 35, 30 years old. And then you see a pretty rapid decline in population there. That's a challenge that's going to be very, very difficult to overcome. Like I said, unless we see that the massive increase in productivity in China, we're probably looking at growth slowing. We're looking at debt becoming a giant problem when it comes to China. And I'm not just talking about their government debt, which only represents something like 26% of GDP. As for example, the United States' debt to GDP ratio is like 126%. China's is about 26%. But when you add in the investment-fueled growth, when I say investment-fueled growth, it's mostly been about bonds, about buying Chinese, debt when it comes to corporate bonds and things like that. And a lot of that is going bad at this point. And I would expect some degree of government intervention pretty soon. So we're looking at here, China's sizable debt continues to be a major bugbear for the investment community. Now, this article came out quite some time ago. And if you look at the non-financial corporates debt is the largest portion of their economy, right? And look, this isn't such a big deal if you're growing population and growing productivity as well. If you're not growing population, then your productivity has to be increasing at a faster rate. The problem with China is their productivity is not increasing at a fast enough rate to replace the population that they're going to be losing in the next couple of years. So this debt becomes more of a problem as the population declines and productivity doesn't keep up. So, and we're looking at a lot of the major debt also is owed by state-owned enterprises as well, and we're seeing them not keep up with private enterprises. We're also seeing the government take a larger interest in some of these enterprises as well. So yeah, so I think that actually, that may be correct. That China would be a major market for the Tesla bot if the Tesla bot becomes what we want it to be, right? I think so. And let me see. I hear that the protests are due to the World Cup. The Chinese people have been able to see everyone else without masks and having a good time. Yeah, I don't know that that's true at all. Like I said, we don't really know unless you speak Chinese and you're on Weibo all the time. I'm not sure that that none of us know really what's going on in China. But wearing masks in Asian countries was really common before. In the wintertime was really common before COVID anyway. Anyone who's ever been to Japan in the wintertime would have noticed that probably a quarter of the population on the subways, even before COVID, was wearing a mask. Of course, that was done as a courtesy to other people. You didn't wear it to protect yourself. You wore it to protect other people from you. That is something that is understood in Japanese and Korean and Taiwanese society. I can't comment on other societies because I don't know them. But that is something that is endemic to those societies. Is if you're sick, it's incumbent upon you to try to do what you can to mitigate getting other people sick. That tendency doesn't exist in other societies. So I don't know what that's like in Chinese society. I don't know if that would really be the case, watching people do World Cup. I guess it could be a contributing factor. The real concern for me is that it appears that the first Chinese vaccine didn't really work all that well. It maybe had 60 to 70% efficacy rate, and vaccination wasn't wide enough. And now the population hasn't had enough exposure to COVID. And so I think that regardless of what happens, there's kind of a real big dilemma or trilemma for China right now. Their economy is going to start falling behind the rest of the world in terms of recovery unless they open up. If they do open up, they're going to have a lot more COVID cases. And if they do open up, can their medical system handle the greater COVID cases? And could this lead to more social unrest or instability? I'm not really sure. So, and Bram says, isn't depending on growth population not like a Ponzi scheme? So to a degree, it is. But there hasn't been a long-term answer to not having a continuously growing population, largely because most of the societies who had a declining population, most of them weren't industrialized societies. They never came up with a solution to it, and they ended up getting conquered by someone else. So in the industrial era, where borders, or at least for the past 70 years or so, have been relatively fixed in the industrialized world, we haven't really had to deal with this yet because we haven't really been invading each other until now, until 2022, of course, with Russia invading Ukraine, and that is one of the things that is a trigger for Russia's unrest and their willingness to invade. I think demographics plays a huge role in that. They have a declining population as well. And not only that, they don't really have that many men right now that are of fighting age. And that number is going to decline very, very quickly. So I think that's one of the reasons behind Putin's calculus as far as why this was the time to start that. Even though there wasn't a real reason to start that invasion, I think that it was basically a now or never kind of deal for him. So, China has not performed these feats of military adventurism in the modern world, even when they have been capable of it, like European countries have. I don't expect this to be one of their responses to population decline or anything like that. But I really don't want to get into that right now. What I'm really talking about is economics here. Looking at labor productivity rates highly dispersed globally. When I looked at all of the lists of the most productive countries in the world in terms of hours worked per influence on GDP, China didn't even make lists of top 20 or top 30. They're pretty far below that. Global average is 21.6 here. Latin America, like Colombia in particular, was well ahead of China in terms of productivity, which is not something that I expected. The Middle East and North Africa being ahead of China is definitely not something I expected. let me put this in perspective for you. Most people don't consider Spain to be a giant world economy, right? Most people don't consider Spain to be all that productive, even though it is really productive. So the economy of Spain, or the entire Middle East and North Africa, has an economy combined about the size of Spain's. Okay, China, in terms of its productivity, is well below global average and well below the Middle East and North Africa in that respect. So their productivity per capita is really, really low, even though their population is 4 times the size of the United States. So it kind of makes sense that being 4 times the size of the United States, you drag a couple 100 million people there into the middle class, you're going to have an economy that's larger than the United States. I think the point that a lot of people should be realizing here is that the next 5 to 10 years in the Chinese economy may be as good as it gets for China in this type of modern economy, unless there's a dramatic shift in productivity and a dramatic shift in what it is that they're producing. Because right now they are still involved pretty heavily in labor intensive work. The problem with that is, I think most Americans manufacture in China right now because most American multinationals are manufacturing in China right now because it's been easy and because you have 3 decades of sunken cost and doing business with them. As other opportunities arise, like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, India, as manufacturing starts to spread out to these countries because of lower costs of labor, and we're also additionally we're looking at higher capital costs here in the future in China, especially if they have a number of debts that go bad in China. We're probably looking at higher capital costs there. I think we're looking at China not being able to thread that needle in terms of growing their productivity faster than their population is declining, and that we should be revising what we think of as peak Chinese economy and what we think of as the ability of China to achieve some of the dreams that a lot of companies are banking on. And that includes Tesla to a degree. So, yeah. Let me go on and just talk about a few questions here. I'd love to talk more about China, but it's not something that a lot of people want to talk about today. But go ahead and fire away if you guys do have questions. This is something that I've been thinking about for a few months. Been listening to the other side for a while. I listened to the Ray Dalio side for a long time. I've never been a huge fan of Ray Dalio. I'll be honest with you, just because everything with him is the sky is falling, the world's about to end, and zombies are about to pour out of the woodwork and eat us all. Okay, so I exaggerated the zombie part, probably just because I love zombie movies, but that's basically he's a perma bear. He's always in a bearish mood no matter what happens, and he's been that way for like 30 years. Okay, so I'm kind of glad that he's retired and he's off the scene. Some new bear will come in and take his place as the new guy that's always sad about everything. But for the most part, you can track where his investment fund has made quite a bit of money, but you can track his sort of broader predictions on the economy and the state of geopolitics. And he's largely been mostly incorrect over the last 30 years that I've been kind of like, really over the last 20 years that I've been kind of following what the guy says. He's an incredibly powerful speaker. He's a persuasive speaker, but his vision of how things would work out has not really occurred, and for a variety of different reasons. We all get blinded by looking at numbers. I suspect he's a lot like me in a lot of ways. He's never seen a spreadsheet or a chart or a graph that he didn't like, and there's a lot more going on than that. So yeah. Let me see here. Perhaps I saw that people see. Okay, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but okay. So yeah, so back to this question here, like growing population, not like a Ponzi scheme. Um, in an industrialized society, it definitely is functioned to a degree like a Ponzi scheme. We don't really have an answer to that, except for Japan's answer, which has been to grow productivity. But even now, that's breaking down. They're not growing productivity faster than their population is declining. And Japan's weapon that they won't use is also immigration. That's the weapon that the United States is using to combat this problem. As we see our birth rate decline, we're allowing immigration, and we're fine with, for the most part, we're fine with immigration, and I'm fine with it at least. And that's going to help sort of offset as we take in populations that are more and more productive. And if you look at the people, that we are bringing over here with H-1B visas and things like that. These are highly these are people that can function in a highly competitive world. These are doctors, lawyers, engineers, scientists, and that sort of thing. We're draining these brains from the rest of the world. I honestly expect us to benefit fairly heavily from the Russian brain drain that's going on right now, and those people are fleeing to, to Kazakhstan, to Georgia, to the United States, to Israel, and to Western Europe as they can. And I actually expect there to be sort of a benefit to that. Yeah. So, how do you think Tesla keeps ramping up production in China despite the supply chain disruptions? So that's an interesting question. Is how do they keep doing that despite supply chain disruption? A lot of that has to do with the fact that they sort of developed their supply chain before a lot of these other guys did as well, and they developed some deals with, especially with battery suppliers. And from what I understand, a lot of, and they're also not going to be under the same export controls as the rest of China is because they're an American-owned company when it comes to chips. But a lot of it actually has to do with them supplying or securing their battery supply chain a long time ago. They did that with Panasonic. They've done that recently with BYD when it comes to the lithium ferrophosphate battery. That's being produced for export right now to other markets, and none of that is supply constrained at this point. So that's part of the reason that they've done that. Is they're just so far ahead. That, like the companies that worry me the most are companies like Neo, which they have a great product. I like their brand. The problem is they're really small. They don't have a lot of the economy of scale mechanisms that a Tesla can use when they can make, a million and a half vehicles a year. And the fact that they're tied down to JAC, which is a state-run enterprise, which they are state-run enterprises are not nimble. They also are locked into this whole, what's almost a Ponzi scheme with these local government lending programs that come with strings attached. That is something that Xpeng to a degree has escaped. But yeah, I'm really kind of concerned about Neo at this point in terms of how they're going to manage debt, how they're going to manage scaling production in an environment of higher capital costs, and when they don't own their own factories. And when we don't know anything really about the production agreement that they have with JAC, we know that it's a flat dollar fee at this point. I don't know if that flat dollar fee is adjustable or anything. So these are some of the things that worry me about EV production in China that probably a lot of people aren't worried about. Yeah. So Anthony Walker, always willing to come in and throw a bomb into a live stream. You always throw bombs in a live stream, which is fine, man. I like talking about that. BlockFi filed for bankruptcy, and I think probably the least anticipated bankruptcy. Everybody knew that they were coming next. And yeah, I think that was kind of the big thing. And when it came to crypto, this is a saying that would go well with stocks, but I don't think goes as well with crypto because it's not as applicable to this situation. But I think either Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett said that the markets can remain irrational far longer than you can remain solvent, meaning that expecting rational behavior out of the market really depends on how much money you have to be rational. Okay. Crypto has never been rational. It's never behaved as predicted. It's behaved in a way that is completely unpredictable, which was it's highly correlated to U.S. stocks, U.S. large cap stocks, which it never should be. On the surface, it shouldn't be correlated to U.S. large cap stocks. So the idea that you could have a lending mechanism that's ungoverned, that doesn't have the sort of equity rules that you do with stocks, right? Doesn't have the collection mechanism that you do with stocks, isn't a security, right? And the idea that you could lend against that securely and provide these like 8% returns on risk, on supposedly risk-free money, that was ludicrous. I never understood how they were going to do that. I never understood how they were going to do that. You can't get an 8% return on a risk-free investment. And I know they weren't advertising it as risk-free, but they were saying, oh, we're going to house your crypto. We're going to use it to backstop loans, and we're going to pay you an 8% return. I don't think BlockFi was offering that much, but it was still something that I found kind of ridiculous. So you realize when you sign up for like staking rewards, you're doing that. It's kind of you realize what you're getting, the 5% return on the staking word is not really a 5% return. It's a dilution, right? But people, that's not happening when you turn around and you're loaning the funds out in terms of crypto. And the fact that there were no rules, really, no universal rules sort of governing what you needed to have an equity. And like there are with stocks, you need at least like a 1/4% or a quarter equity in most things to do this. And it's different for different securities, of course. But there were none of these rules in place. And if they had rules, they weren't universal. Everyone was doing it differently. But even if they had those rules, the margin calls on their thing, and this wasn't done like you're buying buying stocks on margin or anything. But even if we had like margin rules in place, there would have been a margin call like months and months and months ago on these on all of these bets that were made on crypto. And what I'm saying is that this wasn't necessarily inevitable if crypto was not highly correlated with stocks, which it should not be. All right. And this is sort of an argument that I realize that a lot of people aren't really going to care about. But the whole idea of cryptocurrency is it was something that was supposed to be apart from the inflationary policies of central banks. It was supposed to be uncoupled from the global financial network in terms of correlation and return. And none of that has turned out to be true. So what crypto ends up being is still up in the air. But I'm probably not going to look at this as an investable asset for a very, very long time. That any dollar you put into any crypto is basically just gambling. And look, I don't have a problem with gambling if that's what you want to do, but you can't come crying that you lost a bunch of money when you lose it gambling, right? And the big question that I've always had about crypto that no one has been able to answer is this. Really doesn't matter how cool the project is or how great the technology is, how fast it is, or how many use cases it has. How does that translate into a more valuable cryptocurrency when you have endless fractionalization, right? I don't need to buy one Bitcoin to do business. I can do one millionth of a Bitcoin in order to do business, right? You can endlessly fractionalize it. So that question has never really been adequately answered for me, even though there's a supposed, there's a limited number of Bitcoins, and once it's done, it's done. There's not going to be any more produced. But the problem is you can endlessly fractionalize it. And I think to a degree, if the value just kind of stabilized and remained the same, that would actually help crypto in the long run. But we need to find out what exactly is going to happen in crypto before it becomes an asset that you can invest in. I think we're years and years and years away from that. So, yeah. Let me see. Do you think Bitcoin being a completed project makes it different from other cryptocurrencies? Bitcoin is not a complete project. You don't have the ability to do smart contracts on Bitcoin, or at least you didn't the last time I was looking at Bitcoin. And I think that Ethereum, even though I don't think the project should be completed at this point, that features are going to need to be added to it. This is something that I want to see happen in terms of how it's going to work. I think that's really, really exciting. So let me see here. Michael Will says, I'm not a crypto fan, but Coinbase is looking good for when the recession ends and money moves back into crypto and everyone forgets about the latest bankruptcies, picks and shovels plays. To a degree, I think you may be correct. I think there was another correlation that surprised me when it came to crypto, is that cryptocurrency seems to be highly correlated with young male unemployment. That when young males are unemployed, that's when the value of crypto tends to rise. And I think that's because there's an increase in risk-taking behavior. And I think that market got really distorted in 2020 because we saw unemployed males, an increase in risk-taking behavior, but an increase in cash as everyone got, $1,000 a week to stay on unemployment. And, and for a lot of people, that was a giant raise. And instead of you taking that opportunity to pay down debt and things like that, a lot of them, a lot of the folks took a lot of chance on cryptos. There's still a lot of cash in the system though. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, like how much cash is still out there in the system, that the growth of the money supply has basically shut down at this point. The M2 is basically shut down at this point, but there's still people sitting on a lot of cash. And that's still sort of left over from the pandemic. To a degree, the wealth destruction going on right now in with FTX, with BlockFi, things like that, that's going to help a small amount when it comes to reducing the money supply. And I realize that's not a nice thing to say, especially if people lost money. But I'm less interested in saying nice things about people or things or making people feel better, and more interested in addressing the realities of what's going on. The thing that I would like to hammer home when it comes to crypto is that nobody knows what is going on. And in the words of another great Wall Street trader that I can't remember his name, but he said, nobody knows nothing. And I realize that's a double negative, but it's something you should really keep in mind when it comes to any new technology or any technological revolution. I can go back and look at things like, the early days of genomics research. That entire first generations of companies that came out in the early 2000s, they're gone. They're all gone. The first internet companies that came out in the mid 1990s, they're all gone. They either got bought for pennies on the dollar, or they just completely went under. The first wave of dedicated GPUs producing companies, all of them are gone now, except for NVIDIA. And NVIDIA has been forced to heavily diversify over the last couple of years in order to sort of guarantee that they can continue to keep growing. The first group of auto companies that came out in the 1880s to 1940, there's one survivor from that time period, and it is Ford. All the other 1,600 companies that kind of went that were in existence at the time, they're all out of business. So technological revolutions they produce a lot of wealth, but the wealth is more difficult to find than you may think. Like I said, if you were investing in, first of all, everything that's being said right now about EV range, the availability of charging stations, the availability of everything, battery materials, all that, the sort of supply crunch that's coming in, every bit of that was said about gasoline vehicles as well, from people that didn't want to let go of the horse and buggy or just riding around the horse. The people right now that are always like posting memes about, cars running out of juice on the side of the road and then having to be towed by, if we had the ability to post memes in the 1880s, it would have been somebody using a horse to tow a car to a gas station to get it refilled. It would be the same thing that it is today. All of those problems will eventually be overcome when it becomes, and it is already becoming, more economically viable to produce an electric vehicle and to make a profit on it and to sell it to the public than it is to make an internal combustion engine vehicle to do that. We're already there, folks. This is why it's going to happen. It has nothing to do with what you like. It has nothing to do with consumer preferences. It has everything to do with margin. And that's the reason that it's going to happen. So, and the people that are, posting these memes and that are making these bold statements or these long Facebook posts that are anti-EVs by your Uncle Rob, or the guy at Thanksgiving dinner is just saying, well, I can't drive 500 miles and tow my horse trailer. I'm like, you don't do that but once a year anyway. In the future, you'll just rent a truck to do that. You're not gonna own, something that'll have the capability to do that all the time, unless that's what you do for a living and you do it all the time, right? The idea that you can't use an electric vehicle as a workhorse to haul things, I think that is going away. Bram, you're the one that kind of pointed this out earlier, that a lot of times you're carting in vehicles high bulk items that aren't necessarily high weight, so you're not hitting that 81,000 pound limit when it comes to the big Class 8 trucks. Well, apparently Tesla has tested out the Class 8 trucks pulling the full load of 81,000 pounds, and they got 500 miles of range out of that. So, and that was based on a tweet. So I'm not really sure the particulars behind that test. So let's reserve judgment on that until we actually see whether or not it did it without on a single full charge. Yeah. We see here. Bram says, I used to typeset and prepare publications for the conference board in Canada. I remember one was on corporate concentration. That was in 1972. Little has changed. Yeah, little has changed. But even then, that was corporate concentration as a phenomenon was well known. And if you can look at one of the less well-known ones was shipping insurance. And that started in like the 1600s. And now basically there's like 12 operations worldwide to provide all the shipping insurance. Everyone else has been destroyed, and like two of them provide like 90% of the world shipping insurance. So this is one of the ways that we're able to put like giant amount. We're really going to see the wheels come off. So see here, Cisco or what X says X is killing me. What's your opinion? Did you reach the bottom? Um, I've kind of in the near term, I've written off Xpeng. Is the only one of those Chinese EV companies that are public here in the US that I still hold, and I hold more, so I can't really generate on it. But I did concentrate on Xpeng largely because, like I said, the concerns that I raised, going forward, and the increased cost of capital, that sort of thing, that don't own that they need to own their own factories. So yeah. Okay. So audio has gone west again. Looks like I'm having internet connection problems today, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and hop off here because I do have I gotta run to the auto parts star and pick up a new battery for my old truck that I need to tow my boat. And the and I gotta pick up my son from school. But I want to say that I will be back later this week. There's a lot of interesting news going on when it comes to China here. A lot of interesting news when it comes to the economy. We can talk about crypto, but like I said, I think that we're not going to know anything for a while. Oh, Sheila just says, "Hey Jason, you've already talked about this. What are your thoughts on the SoFi price drop, SoFi loan extension, and crypto regulation threat?" So the entire value of all of the crypto that SoFi has on deposit from its customers is $132 million. It is a really, really tiny part of their business. They could force SoFi to drop crypto, and I would be more worried about people not joining SoFi just because you couldn't trade crypto at all. But that's probably not what's going to happen. So enforcement actions happen by regulatory agencies all the time. It's usually a threatening letter is sent. A letter denying it is published publicly. The lawyers start working behind the scene. A fine is paid. The behavior is corrected. Everyone moves on. So, and I don't think it's not a crypto regulation threat. It's part of the agreement that they had when it comes to the bank charter. The real question is, would they be in danger of losing their bank charter? There's no indication of that right now, and that would be a big deal. The student loan moratorium extension, I think we were expecting that since a couple of Republican states decided to challenge the student loan forgiveness plan. I think we were expecting a loan extension. But with the rapidity that SoFi is diversifying their income sources and the student loan business is becoming a smaller and smaller portion of that business overall, not only that lending is becoming so the actual product growth is like there's a 4.6 to 1 advantage in financial services and technology services growth over their loan portfolio growth at this point. That I think that relatively soon the conversation of student loans being this giant portion of their business is probably going to be over when it comes to SoFi, and they're going to have such a widely developed breadth of services that it's simply going to become another cog on the wheel of things that they offer. So yeah, Cisco WebEx, did we reach bottom? I don't know that we have reached bottom when it comes to Xpeng. I really don't. So yeah. We said not trying to chase you away, always learning you need Starlink. No, it's Starlink. Actually, I've been considering Starlink actually for a couple of different reasons. But the other thing is that I do need to actually go ahead to the auto parts store. I got a little nasty note on my vehicle from the police saying that I need to move my car every 3 days or something, or they're going to tow it. And I just hopped in to demonstrate that I could drive to the police officer who put the notice on there. and the battery was dead. So I actually do have to get this done today. All right. So thank you very much for attending today. I'll be back on Thursday for sure. And yeah, if you want to check out my Patreon, that'd be great. I always forget to advertise that on here, or subscribe to my channel if you have not. Thank you very much, folks, and I will see you on Thursday.